G-Money Gage Young has shown a ton of potential, both in the regional scene and in a loss on Dana White's Contender Series. Today I want to take a look at the Missouri prospect's highlights as he has gone on to dominate the FAC and earn himself a shot in the Ultimate Fighting Championship, skipping over another Contender Series fight to get straight into the big show this weekend. Today we're going to have a look at the career highlights of Gage Young. Gage Young has been an athlete since his youth. Now, while his primary focus was on high school football, he did begin wrestling alongside his football career, having begun training at the age of 12. Being unsure after high school at what he would commit to for a career, he'd used his wrestling background to get into mixed martial arts and has since put all his time into perfecting his craft. In 2019, Young would make a debut as an amateur in his birth state of Missouri against Larry Hill, and early on you'd see him lean into his wrestling to dominate the Midwest amateur scene. 8 fights across only 2 years, he'd go 6-1, finishing 5 opponents, and his boxing would continue to come together, pairing nicely with the security blanket of takedowns and ground and pound. And even in his only amateur loss, you can't really complain. His opponent was 10-1 with double the experience, and the loss would only serve as motivation. He'd finish a 4-fight 2020 campaign with his first pro fight in December, winning a 15-minute unanimous decision. From main carding as an amateur, he'd win 4 professional fights and earn himself a main event for the FAC in December of 2022. Unfortunately, this would be his first professional defeat once again, sending him back to the drawing board, but again, it would set up for a nice bounce back. With Gage Young completing the comeback after his first professional loss, with 3 straight finishes, including 2 in the first round, he'd fight on the 2024 edition of the Contender Series, but he'd match up with an Eternal MMA champion and a black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu in Quinlan Salkill, who was on his own 6-fight win streak. The first round was stand-up back and forth, with Young controlling the center of the cage and stuffing 8 of his opponent's takedown attempts, but Quinlan, even with the wrestling failure in the round, would still land more significant strikes with his long-range kicks, long-range boxing. The stand-up was back and forth as it gets, with Quinlan just edging it out. The second round would be a lot of the same, stand-up with both fighters having success, landing big strikes. A difference, however, would be the wrestling offense of the Australian. He'd land a takedown on his own combinations early in the second round, and then late in the second round when Young was really starting to feel it, on the front foot, landing with Quinlan up against the fence, Quinlan would land another takedown. Not that he would land much damage off of it, but it would stifle Young's forward pressure and damaging strikes. I highly recommend, as an MMA fan, that you go back and watch this fight, as it's as high level as it gets between 2 future prospects that have massive potential in the UFC. Nonetheless, the Australian would have his hand raised and a contract in hand, while Young would return to the regional scene. Dana, in a show where he would rarely do for the Contender Series, would be out of his seat and into the octagon to show respect to both fighters, and he went up to Young, surely recognizing the result wouldn't go his way, but that they'd be watching his next regional bout. It wouldn't be unfamiliar territory. Young bouncing back from the loss, and surely with the UFC brass watching as mentioned, he'd prove that the regional opponents he was fighting are just not talented enough, and he would land a second round TKO, ultimately getting the call at some point to get into the UFC, skipping over what would be a second Contender Series opportunity to get straight to the big show for this fight against Evan Elder. Let me know your guys' thoughts on a potential superstar prospect in Gage Young. The guy has great boxing, great wrestling, defense, and you can see from fight to fight that he is always improving, training hard, and has an extremely bright future ahead of him. But that'll do it for today's video, guys. If you enjoyed, remember to smash that like button, subscribe to Combat Sports Central, and I will see you in the next one.